If this salt, if we, the church of God, lose our saltiness, lose our purpose, the world will perish so quickly. And we will be good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And I don't know about you, but I don't want that. I want our nation, I want our lives, I want our children, I want our church to remain and have its purpose and be used by God to preserve what all we've worked so hard for. And then, of course, it says that you are the light of the world. A tower built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, and instead they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others, they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father that is in heaven. You see, we are a culture that is obsessed with lights. We are. We have Christmas lights. We have fireworks. Right? We look at the stars at night. Some of you have not seen stars in a good long while because you live in the city. I actually lived very close to here in the Princeton Park Edition for 5 years. So I know there's not a lot of stars here in Rowlett. You have to go out a little further. But when you do, it's the most magnificent thing. You're in awe of how beautiful. We are a culture that is fascinated with lights. And that's because God has deeply ingrained inside of us that it is it's something that is naturally occurring that hates living in darkness. We know that bad things happen if you stay in darkness. You can injure yourself, or you get that creepy feeling like someone's following you, or you're about to be hurt in some really bad way. In darkness, really there's nothing there. But we are not creatures of the darkness. We are creatures of the light. And so, whenever my children are young, I try to convince them that nothing will happen to you. You can go and be in your room, and it's okay for it to be dark. And yet they want a light in their room. They want that security. They want something that illuminates all around them so that they can see, because there's something that happens when the light comes on. People have vision. What does the Bible say about vision? It says, without it, the people perish. They cast off restraint. You see, the light is synonymous with God, right? Because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and He spoke. And one of the first things He did was to divide light and darkness and create light. And I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing that one of the first things He did, before He went and created the beasts of the field, before he made the heavens and the earth, He spoke light into existence. Before He created you and I, before He created the firmament, all the things, He created light, right? We're drawn to light like moths. James chapter 1, verse 17 says, God is the Father of lights, and in Him there is no shadow. We want to know the truth, and we want to see clearly what is created. You see, my primary job is actually in hospice. And then I've been in ministry for 15 years. But I will say that some atheists say that there is no God. But I've never met an atheist on their deathbed. Everyone, when faced with the end of their life, is looking for the light of God. And God doesn't create atheists. He hides His word in every single one of our hearts. And He gives a longing. No one on earth could say that they did not know that there was a God. Because He puts that natural desire in our heart to find Him. to be with him. And when we are faced with death, we have to have that security to know that there's a life that is better afterward. So we have a longing for God. And God is light. We hate living in darkness. We hate it. And what happens? Everyone feels that scramble to turn on the light when it gets a little too dark. And so when people pass, I always try and go in and ask them, would you know the Lord today? Would you know Jesus Christ? And if they're a believer, I rejoice with them. I say, well, you will be with him in paradise. I envy you, brother. But if not, I ask them. And I encourage the family, know Jesus today. Don't go through this life without the light on, because you will injure yourself. You will hurt yourself. And in the end, it leads nowhere. So you see, we've been given the light. It says that we are salt. We are here to preserve. We're here to give flavor to the world. We're here to give purpose to the world. But we are also called to be the light, right? We've been given the light, the message of Jesus, the words of mercy and grace to a fallen world. These words have been the power to lift us out of our situation, to turn on the light in their life, in the people of God's life, in God's people outside of the walls of the church. God has given us the purpose to turn on our light so that others can see. See, some of us think that the light that we hold is only for us, and we can hide it. But anytime I walk into a room and tell me that this is right, Pastor, they always know you're a pastor. You can try and hide it all you want. You can try and put it underneath, but people will find it. Because they live in such darkness that even a little bit of light makes all the difference. And if you're a believer of God, you'll do the same thing. I've tried to play it where I was very low key. I was trying to play it where I was reserved and not had my pastor hat on. Just so that I could fit in with the crowd. Just so that I could have a moment of normalcy. That never happens. It never happens. People always see the light. Everywhere I go. And everywhere you go, that's okay. They should see the light as well. We are not creatures of the darkness. We don't live in darkness. And so the thing about it is sometimes light does a few things. Have you ever turned on the light and you didn't like what you see when you looked in the mirror? Light does a few things. It exposes things that are ugly. Things that are imperfect, things that could use some work. That's what light does. It also attracts. It takes people that are from afar, and when they see the light, they are automatically pulled towards it. And then finally, light pushes back darkness. So it does these three. It attracts people. And this is what I would encourage you this year to do outside of the walls of the church, is put on your light. I myself came to know the Lord not for pure reasons, but because I wanted to go to church and I wanted to be around other young people. And there was not a lot of handsome young people in our youth group, but I was one of them. So it was easier to be in that group, right? And so I started going to church for the wrong reasons. I wanted to be there for the friendships, and I wanted to be there because I was probably the most popular person in the room. And that's normal for people. That's normal, those vain, conceited things. But when the light turned on, I realized that was the wrong thing. That was the wrong motivation. And God changed my heart from seeking attention to loving him truly. People would come and we would do these food ministry where we would pass out food to people that were very, very poor and very underprivileged communities. And it was a miraculous thing to see what God would do simply by the act of loving our neighbor. And God showed me the light through the work of his Holy Spirit in that. And I've never turned back. And so, even today, you may be far away from God, or you may be here for the wrong reasons tonight. But guess what? God will still do the work because of the people around you doing their job and shining the light. And when you go into the workplace, or when you go into your schools, you are the light. And many people will come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ simply because they spend time with you. Because the light does what it does best, right? It attracts people. And then secondly, the light reveals. The light reveals every detail, every wrinkle, every sin, every terrible habit that you have. God's light, properly placed at the center of our heart, reveals every detail and gives light to every situation or problem. Everyone knows when you point a light at something that does not want to be exposed, what does it do? It runs. It runs away, but at everyone who desperately needs guidance is your best friend. My wife and I's relationship when we were young was that of I was very ignorant about I went to church for a long time, but I was very ignorant. I knew a lot of scriptures, I knew a lot of hymns, and I'd gone to the Church of Christ for so many years, but I was ignorant of the Holy Spirit. That was one thing they don't really preach in Church of Christ. You learn a lot of things about God, but you don't know the Holy Spirit. And so whenever I would come to church, she would teach me, which I learned it from whoever I had to, okay? And she would teach me about the Holy Spirit, because she had gone to a Holy Spirit-filled church. And she wasn't my wife at the time, but it came to me through her. And so it revealed so many places of my heart that God needed to come in, that God needed to expose, and she would counsel me out of the foolish things that I would do, the things in my heart that were improper, right? How many of us men would be lost without Jesus in our lives? Show of hands real quick. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tobin. Right? God reveals through his light. And anyone, it can come through anyone. It can come through your best friend, it can come through a young lady, it can come through whoever God chooses to use. And that can be you. That can be you. And finally, light pushes back the darkness. Eventually, when I committed my life to Jesus Christ, I started going to church more often, and my light got a lot brighter. As a matter of fact, I was ashamed of God before I knew the Holy Spirit. And then one day, whenever I was filled with the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in other tongues, the light came on. And immediately, the flame of God in my heart shone so brightly that people didn't recognize me. Whenever I went to school, my youth pastor would give me these invitations to come to different events and things like that. And when I ran out, I actually went to the band hall copy room and put it on there and made as many copies as I could without throwing an alarm, just so that I could get so many people to come to know Jesus. And my band director, he was a good friend of mine, so he just allowed it. But I'm so glad. People would say, who is this man? Not unlike Paul. Not unlike Paul in the Bible was the transformation in my life. And I will let you know that anyone in your schools, maybe you're not like Paul, but maybe you know someone who is. They could be such a radical Christian. They could be such a radical believer for God.